Hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Megan. I'm the Mood Read Queen, and on today's video you're gonna, experience some true frustration with me, hopefully, because two things. Are you ready? Two reasons why I'm frustrated. One, I recorded this video twice yesterday. Yes, the first time it was over an hour. It was an hour and 4 minutes. And then I realized that when I went to upload it so I could, edit it, I use this program online to edit because it's free. So heck yeah. It said the video didn't exist. Yes. Okay. And so then I was like, okay, well, I talked a lot. I kind of got off task. I don't mind recording it again. Right? Okay. So I said, hey, everybody, nice to see you. This is the second time I've recorded this. Hopefully it's the only time that you're going to actually hear me talking about this. And then I talked for 50 minutes, okay? 50 minutes. And then do you know what happened? Do you know what happened? There was no video again. Yeah. And so I walked myself down to tech today because you guys know I'm super classy, and I record on my on my Chromebook, my school issued device, because that's how we teachers roll. And I walked down there and I was like, so this is the problem. The camera's spotty, so that's why I sometimes can't record, because it doesn't work. And also it keeps deleting my files. And they were like, yeah, we're probably just going to get you a new one. And I said, okay, I shall mourn the loss of my stickers. And I let them have it, and I don't have a replacement yet. So I thought, well, while these, stories are fresh in my head, while I talked about them twice, so this is going to be hopefully a very succinct video. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. But I'm now on my my extra spare student Chromebook. So classy. So classy. And then it keeps changing this color palette, so it grays me out. I don't even know what's going on. So I just want you to manage your expectations, okay? I've said this twice now. This is the third time, so I'm a little frustrated. And then also I'm recording on a janky device, so it should be a really good time, I think. Okay. So anyway, let's chat. Just quick updates. I am working on some cool video ideas. I am kind of in my head trying to do 2 videos a week, and then the next week do 1 video, and then 2 videos a week, and then 1 video. Just kind of slide back in. That didn't work out. I was ready for it to work out, but then the Chromebook wasn't working. So it's pretty good. So we're off track again, but whatever. We're working on it. We just celebrate the little things around here, like the fact that I still make videos. But other things I want to talk about, I don't get me wrong. I love sharing what books I've read with you guys. I really do. But at the same time, there are so many other things that I want to talk about, and so many other video ideas that I have, and I just have not been able to do those things. So just know that they're coming. The series that I've started that I kind of took a break from, I'm going back to those soon. And I'm excited. So this is my mid-month wrap-up. That's coming a bit late, but I meant it was going to be on time. It was going to be on time. But now it's late, so we just accept it. We just accept it. And I'm hoping I have a lot of good books to talk about in the second half of the month, and then you'll come back. So I read 12 books this month, and it's a miracle. I don't know how. So far this month. I read 12 books in December, which was also a miracle because that was a shit month. That was a rough time. And the lighting, right now, normally the lighting's pretty good. I think I've kind of figured out the lighting in here as best I can, but I don't know what's going on with this Chromebook, with the ring light, with these dark circles under my eyes. I don't know, but we're going to accept it because it's just a reflection of my soul. So anyway, let's see if we can get done within 45 minutes. What do you think? Because now that I've had practice summarizing all of these books multiple times, I think I can figure out what's important and what you don't even need to know. And, I probably overshared. And so I'm thinking you wouldn't appreciate that anyway. So we'll just try our best. Okay, so I've read kind of a decent amount of books that were on my TBR list. So just kind of update you on that. There's a duology that I read that I think was originally supposed to be one book that was on my TBR list, so that's good. So that if we count that as like one book, even though it was two, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Seven of the ones I'm going to talk about were on my TBR lists in some way, shape, or form, which I feel really good about because you guys know I kind of stopped I made the last TBR list I made was sort of in the fall, and it was kind of a fall non TBR because as a mood reader, I can get bogged down in TBR. You know, we all know this about me. But I do feel pretty good. I think that if I have realistic expectations, like I still want to be able to just pick something up, you know? Like one of the books on here, I literally found like 3 days ago and was like, you know what I'm feeling like? This book. And it was a book I hadn't even added to my want to read list on Goodreads yet. I just put it up. I just pulled it up. I paid $4 for it because it's not at the library and it's not on Kindle Unlimited, but I did it anyway. And it's good. I liked it. So yeah. Okay, let's chat now. Let me just tilt this guy. Okay, so I read a duology at the start of the month, and it's by Jamie Schlosser, my girl Jamie. Jamie wrote it's like Between Dusk and Dawn or Dawn and Dusk series, but I just call it the Fae King's Curse series, and it's those 4 books. I think there's more coming. I hope there's more coming. That are about the cousins and then another person in the 4th book, which is, I don't even know if it's worth mentioning. These Fae cousins who are cursed with blindness until they find their mates. Anyway, sounds ridiculous, but that first book is like nearly flawless, like really, really good. And I follow her on Instagram, and she's one of those authors that does those like really addictive, like shares quotes and does like the video stuff. And I'm like, stop doing that. You keep dangling these books that I've already read in front of me and I want to read them again. And so she posted one called Monster in the Moonlight. And I was like, ooh, this sounds really good. Dark Fae. And so I had added it to my want to read list. And then she started posting about a different book called The Dark Fae's Bargain, and then the second book, which is called The Dark Fae's Destiny. And I realized, I don't know if she split them, or if they were always going to be 2, but that's the book. So that was the book that was on my TBR, and then it became 2 books, and I was like, hell yeah, I can count it as 2 books. Woo! So anyway, first book, I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quickly. I don't want to spoil a lot. I know I spoil a lot in these. I think these books are worth checking out. So the first book, The Dark Fae's Bargain, it's the first book in the Dark Fae of the Lost Land. And I would really encourage you, if this book sounds interesting to you, or if this duology sounds interesting to you, to really check out the Fae King's Curse series first, because that series, especially the first 2-3 books, does a much better job kind of succinctly and more like tightly explaining plot and character and like time, how much time passes in the Fae realm versus the human realm, that sort of a thing. This book takes place in the same world, but it's different because it's Dark Fae instead of like the Fae, whatever. And I felt like it was sort of like shaking apart at the seams, like it was not quite holding it together. It was close, but it wasn't holding it together. And so the first book, The Dark Fae's Bargain, essentially it's about this Dark Fae. He didn't start out as a Dark Fae. His name is Alistair, and the Dark Fae for many years were banished, and that's a plot point in book 4 of the Fae King's Curse series. And when they come back, all of the bargains that Alistair sort of made on behalf of his master, who is this sort of evil, dark Fae who Alistair like traded his soul to help this woman once, and Alistair serves her. And so when they come back from the brink, from like this unknown, realm, all the bargains sort of pick back up where they left off. And so he goes, even though he doesn't want to, because he's not a fan of this anymore, but he's bound to do it. He goes to fulfill the end of the bargain, and he meets Hannah. And Hannah lives in the human realm, and he's obviously Fae. And he has this ability, he's a gatekeeper. He can make these like vortexes and like portals and stuff. And he's the only one of his kind. And so he meets Hannah, who's very sick, and she is basically dying. And she knows she's dying. Her family, her father and mother won't admit it. Doctors don't know what's wrong with her, but she just knows she's coming close to the end. And it's this mysterious illness that came on like 3 weeks ago. But Alistair knows differently, and that is that Hannah's grandfather, when he was a child, made a deal with Alistair. And then the rest of his life was paranoid about like this evil man, this dark man, this demon. And his family thought he was just eccentric. But the deal was for his firstborn child. And he was convinced that he was not going to have children. But he did accidentally, Hannah's father. And so, because the Dark Fae were unavailable during that time, Alistair couldn't come back for the father. And so it skipped a generation, the bargain did, because it only works on children or young people. And the goal is that it's sort of like a changeling thing where if you take a baby or a toddler, they'll die, which is sad, okay, but people die from mysterious illnesses all the time. And basically take them to the Fae realm. His dark sort of master can bring them back to life, and then they like sort of live there and fulfill a purpose, whatever. But it skips the father because he's like a full-grown man. Hannah's 24, so she's obviously an adult, but there's no one younger than her. She doesn't have any kids. So it's she's the closest thing, basically. So that's what happens. And so he realizes that she's sick. He knows she's going to die. And then kind of in a twist of fate, realizes that there's more to their connection than just the bargain. More to their connection than these two people who are bound by this bargain. Because he feels things for her that he shouldn't necessarily. And that's when he realizes that Hannah is his mate. And so he has to figure out how to save her. And it's a fascinating story. The first book is really their first connection, him talking to her parents about how to save her life, her parents coming to terms with the bargain that Hannah's grandfather made, Alistair and Hannah being able to spend some time together, Hannah getting sicker, and Alistair trying to figure out how to save her. And in the second book, so that's the first book, The Fae King's Bargain. The second book, The Fae King's Destiny, they think for a while that they've fixed it. But clearly there's two books for a reason. And so this is a series that, I say a series, it's a duology that really travels across time and space, because you've got the human realm and you've got the Fae realm. Time passes differently in the Fae realm, of course. But you also have Alistair being able to time travel, because there is this substance called glow, which is introduced in the Fae King's Curse series, which is like basically concentrated like Fae water that can amplify a Fae's abilities. And of course, Alistair has very powerful abilities, very rare abilities, and instead of just vortexes to different places, he's able to create vortexes to different times. And he thinks if he takes Hannah from a different time before she's sick and into the Fae realm, she's, number one, not going to remember him, but they could overcome that. But then she wouldn't get sick ever. That's his plan. And I will not say what happens, but needless to say, it's quite complicated. And like I said, the story itself doesn't quite hold it together. It doesn't quite keep it together, but it's fascinating seeing how, first of all, the Dark Fae are interesting characters. They were in like this lost land and this, kind of kept apart from everybody else. And so like they've got this whole like feeding on blood thing because they didn't have food. And so like that's something that Alistair has done. And so you've got like this sort of kind of vampiric element. But then you also have the fact that they're mates. You have the time travel. And then also, is there sort of this cyclical nature of time? Causation is a good sort of question that's talked about in the series, and it's interesting. So I would say it is not my favorite Jamie Schlosser book or books, but I do think that it was worth reading, and I did enjoy it. My favorite book of hers is still the first book in the Fake King's Curse series. So I read those. I gave them both 4 stars. Then I moved on to my third Emily Henry book, Book Lovers. And I have a copy of this, but it's at school behind my desk, so I forgot it. And Emily Henry and I have a unique relationship. And it is something that I think I'm willing to kind of explore in a video, if possible, because I want to figure out why she does not hit the way I want her to. Because it's like Emily has got like an arrow, you know? And she's like shooting for my heart. She's like, I'm going to get you, Megan. I'm going to get you. And instead, there's like a little bit of wind. She didn't account for it, right? And it like embeds itself in my shoulder. And it hurts like a mother, right? And I bleed, but I don't die. And I know that's a ridiculous analogy. But that's what I feel like with her books. It's like they're so close, right? She missed me by a few inches. I could have died, but I didn't. And instead it hurts, and I'm a little annoyed, honestly, that someone shot me in the wrong place. And that's what I feel about her books. And to give her credit, I didn't read Beach Read the way I should have. It was a book that I was too busy to read when I started reading it and should have just put aside, but instead sort of slugged through for a month before finally finishing it in a few days. And I didn't have the best experience with it. People Meet on Vacation, I have spoken about that on this channel, and I might have to rant about it at some point. But I have a very complicated relationship with People Meet on Vacation. And so, hold on, I'm like maneuvering myself over here. So I had a friend who was like, okay, I think she agreed with me on People Meet on Vacation. She really liked Beach Read, and she was like, I think your favorite is gonna be Book Lovers. I think you should read Book Lovers. So I read Book Lovers, and there's a lot of things I loved about Book Lovers. But it's not it. It wasn't it. And I don't know why. I think I have some ideas. I think one of them is maybe I'm used to more of a sort of back and forth narrative, which, if you think about it, dual narration or multiple narration is not really a realistic sort of thing. You don't find that in life, right? I can't walk around and hear other people's thoughts and sort of put the picture together. I can only know what I perceive them to think, what I know they're thinking based on what they've told me, that sort of a thing. And so in that sense, Emily Henry's sort of, one-sided narration is realistic. At the same time, I struggle to fully relate to her characters, those who are not a part of their narration. So the story is about Nora and Charlie. And Nora is a literary agent living in New York. New York is a huge part of her identity. Her, memories of her mother and her younger sister. And then there's Charlie, who's a literary agent or editor. And they kind of have a working relationship. They've met before. And when Nora, who is described as a workaholic, is sort of dragged to Sunshine Falls, which is the main setting of one of her clients' most recent books by her sister, because, her sister wants her to have more of a life, she ends up running into Charlie, who's actually from Sunshine Falls, and they start a sort of a will they, won't they, is it the right person, wrong time, wrong place situation. And I liked it a lot. And Nora and I are very, very different people, and yet I did relate to her in a lot of ways. And I think Charlie is the most well-developed male character that she's had. But I don't think her other characters were necessarily super well-developed. Whatever the guy, I think his name's like Augustus, or August or something, in Beach Read, and then Alex and People Meet on Vacation. neither of those characters really hit home for me, especially Alex. Alex felt very one-dimensional in a lot of the story. And I was talking to a friend about this today, and she was like, I was trying to explain it, and she's like, well, what's interesting is if you have like The Hating Game, for example, which was one of my top 10 books of the year last year, that's a one-person narration, and I still felt like Josh, who's the main male character, is fully formed. I can understand him. I relate to him. And even she's able to portray him fully as a character, even when she doesn't fully understand herself, which is impressive. And so there's something missing with Emily Henry. I think Book Lovers was enjoyable. I think if you like books and maybe she hasn't hit for you yet, this might be a better one. But it was enough to convince me to keep trying with her. And then maybe she'd hit it home eventually. I don't know, though. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know. I feel like Emily Henry and I are going to be like those people that could have been friends, but instead we're just acquaintances that we see each other randomly. Like follow each other on social media kind of a thing. Okay. Then I read The Holiday Trap by Rowan Parrish. I actually have my copy of it here. I didn't read the physical copy of it. I did listen to the audiobook. I let myself buy that on Audible. Or no? Did I? I might have listened to it through the library, actually. No, I think I listened to it on Hoopla. Heck yeah. So, you guys know I have a huge love affair with Rowan Parrish. I love her. I worship the ground she walks on. She is truly excellent. I, however, doubt I will ever read a book by her that marks me more than Better Than People or Best Laid Plans, which are the first two books in the Garnet Run series that I read in June and July of last year. Like, those two books really, forever, I am changed. But this is her kind of biggest sort of commercial release. And I liked it. I really did. It didn't hit 100% for me. Some of that is due to sort of being uncomfortable with maybe the accuracy of some of the storytelling. So this book is about Truman and Greta. And it is a kind of retelling of The Holiday, like our, that great, oops, sorry, I just hit that cord next to my computer. But Cameron Diaz and Jack Black and Jude Law and Kate Winslet, And it starts because Truman finds out that his boyfriend has a secret family. And Greta is sort of publicly embarrassed by her family. She is a lesbian. They are not homophobic necessarily. I don't think it's sort of a purposeful unacceptance. It's more of a, why do you have to be so annoying about this? Which sounds terrible to say out loud. But basically, her family kind of volunteers her for a kind of a fundraiser date auction. And Greta's like, this is really bad, actually. Like, no. And so they both share a friend named Ramona. And Ramona was roommates with Greta in college. Greta lives in Maine and on Owl Island. And then Ramona now lives in New Orleans, which is where Truman is from. And so she suggests that they house swap for a month. And so it starts this really cute story that also has a lot of depth. And I think the reason I struggled with this, there's two reasons. One, it is dual narration, but with two different stories. So you've got Greta's narrative that's happening in New Orleans, and then you've got Truman's narrative that's happening in Maine. So that's a lot of story to cover, like two couples worth. And that's about, a lot to cover. The other reason I struggled is because Greta's storyline was more developed than Truman's in terms of her character development. And I don't care about it being uneven necessarily, because I love Truman. Truman is my favorite character. He's the real MVP of this book. And every character that you meet is a very Rowan Parrish character, for sure. Like, they just feel like a Rowan Parrish character. But Greta has this thing with her family where she realizes that even though you might love your family and your family's not normal, it doesn't mean that they can't also hurt you and be somewhat toxic. And that was a hard sort of pill to swallow, because, just reflecting on your family and your life, sometimes you might learn things and realize things that you're just not entirely comfortable with. And I related to her probably too much. And so that made me uncomfortable, not gonna lie. I was like, let's go back to Truman. I love Truman. I want to spend more time with Truman. And so Truman has a romance with this guy named Ash, who's a florist. And then Greta has a romance with a woman named Karis, who is a math teacher. And she also, like, I don't know, does a bunch of random stuff in New Orleans. And I really did enjoy this book. I don't know if I'd recommend it as your first Rome Parish book. I don't know if I would not, I don't know, recommend it. But I do want you to realize that if you do read it, that there is so much more out there for her. And, if this wasn't it for you, that doesn't mean that Rome Parish isn't for you, because she is truly one of the most beautiful writers. And she's able to explain things in such a way that you're just like, that was flawless, and I relate so much to that. And she's also able to tell stories that feel complicated and real, and not with unnecessary complications, but with real complications. And she has books that, if I were to elaborate on the plot, sometimes they feel, they might sound boring, but I don't think they are. And I really did like this book quite a bit. So that was The Holiday Trap. So then I read, and forgive me if I kind of wiggle around a little bit during this video. My back has been really bothering me. I have this heating pad on behind me, and it is just not a happy time to be in my body today. So I'm trying to be comfortable while I chat with you, because what I really want to do is not be sitting on my couch right now. But it's probably the most comfortable place I can be. Okay, so I read webtoons. I've talked about this quite a bit. I'm just going to stick this right there. And I typically do try to read. So I've read a bunch of manga online. I've read webtoons online. I've paid for it in some places. I've definitely got it for free in other places. And it just really depends on what it is. If I feel like I've paid my dues enough for a certain author and I'm like, listen, I can't afford this right now, I'm going to read this for free, and then I'll, buy some episodes later. Sometimes I do that. So there was one that I had been eyeing for a while. I knew it was fairly complete, almost there. It had multiple side stories, and it looked interesting to me. So did the art, and I decided to read it. And then I was really glad, because it was actually divided into 3 volumes on Goodreads, and I was like, who am I to question? I'm counting. And so I read this one called Love Shuttle. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the author of this. And I get also, because it was added to Goodreads by who knows who, I don't remember people's names. But I will say this is an Omegaverse story. So if you're, and I'm not going to get into too much depth with Omegaverse stuff, but essentially you've got Alpha, Omega, Beta. And so Beta is regular human. And depending on the world you're in, sometimes they go into a lot of depth with the description of that world and how it may be different from other Omegaverse stories. And sometimes they just assume that you know what's going on, and they just let you let you go. So there's betas, which are basically regular humans. They don't have heats or ruts. They don't, their bodies are regular, normal human stuff going on, right? Regular hormones, regular, if you're a woman, you menstruate, whatever, right? I say that's normal. Obviously, there are non-binary people as well, but this is not part of the conversation. Sorry. So then we've got alphas and omegas, and omegas are typically, stereotypically smaller, more feminine, typically more the submissive role, usually physically weak. And then you've got the omegas, who are typically more masculine, typically larger, more dominant, that sort of a thing. And alphas can get omegas pregnant regardless of their, I guess you could say genitalia. So, you could be a man, or male or female alpha, or a male or female omega. And omegas can get pregnant regardless of, again, what you're working with. So, it's an interesting idea, and I've read a lot of these over the years. I say over the years, like it's so long. Over the last like 2.5, 3 years. And sometimes I'm feeling it. Sometimes I'm like, that's iffy. And I was fascinated by this story and I wanted to read it. But it's basically about this Omega who hasn't like had his heat yet. He has never, so he's basically like a half Omega because he's like just a regular dude. He doesn't have any pheromones that he gives off. He hasn't gone into heat. Like, he doesn't have to take suppressants. He doesn't take any medication. Like, he's just some regular guy. And everyone assumes he's an alpha because he's strong and he's tall. And then it hits him, of course, randomly out of the blue. There are a lot of alphas at his work, and one in particular that he finds attractive but is constantly annoyed by. And basically they end up becoming like sexually involved because like if you're going through that, you need someone with you. And so the story becomes about whether or not they're going to be more involved like personally instead of just physically, based on like what his needs are and if they want to actually be romantically involved. And I didn't hate the story at all. In fact, I gave parts of it 4 stars, but at the same time, volume 3 is like really problematic. Because they also start with a side story with one of the Omega's older alpha brothers who has kind of like this complex because he's sort of smaller. He's not as strong as his Omega brother. He was the 3rd son and his mom really wanted an Omega son. And he feels like he's a disappointment, even though no one thinks he's a disappointment. And he ends up dating the doctor of the Omega brother. And that starts out interesting, fine. And then things get weird because there's another older alpha brother who is very possessive of this brother and has been sort of protecting him his whole life, keeping him from being bullied. And then you find out that this older brother has feelings for him. And it's weird. I kept reading and watching because it was like a webtoon. So I was like looking at the images, but I was like, why? Why are we doing this? This is so bad. What did we jump ship? Like, what were you thinking? Whatever your name is, the author. What sort of things were, going through your head when you decided to write this? It was strange. Would I recommend it? It was a fun time. It was a long webtoon. It was like almost 100 episodes, which I think is pretty long. And I enjoyed it though. I mean, I was motivated to keep going, but also, I mean, it's a pretty slice of life story and it's low on plot. I'm just gonna be honest with you. It's low on plot and it gets repetitive, like in terms of like physical intimacy. Like it's a lot. So anyway, it was alright. It was okay. I, could have liked it more, could have liked it less. Okay. Then I read, and I don't like how my Goodreads organize these, because I finished a lot of them on the same day, but like, it's weird. So, I started Pride and Prejudice, and finished it. This is a really cool copy that I got from Seven Seas Entertainment, which is actually a publisher that does manga. And it's not a manga, although I do have a manga version of this story. And I thought it was cool because I got this at a used bookstore a couple years ago. It came out in 2016, so you might check it out if this is of interest to you. But it's got manga-style illustrations of all of the characters. And I think that's kind of cool. So here's, of course, the Bennett sisters. Lizzie and Darcy. I'll just kind of like let you go look at them. More Lizzie and Darcy. Hopefully you can see this because I can't see when I'm holding it up. I don't know who this is. I think this is Lydia. But I think these people over here are like the villains. Like this guy is definitely Wickham, Ugh. And then there's the actual cover. And then here's another of our sweet babes. Oh, so cute, right? So anyway, I need to go through and annotate this because I'm working on annotations. Like, I want to annotate stuff this year. Like, I really, really want to. That's a priority of mine. And I think I'm going to annotate books that I listen to because I think that would be fun. But anyway, I was reading this because we're doing our Jane Austen book club. We listened to Sense and Sensibility in December, and our January book was Pride and Prejudice. And I have a pretty long history with Pride and Prejudice. I've watched that 2005 movie so many times, guys. So many times. And And then I read the book, part of it, when I was in high school. It didn't really vibe with me. I have read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and I really did like that one, which is interesting. But I like this better than Sense and Sensibility. I do think the plot is it's a better plot for sure, and I think it's more interesting. There's more stuff going on. I think the characters are more believable. And of course, who doesn't love that whole enemies to lovers, having insight into yourself and thinking, what are you prideful about? What are you prejudiced about? And sort of learning to evaluate yourself in relation to other people. I think that's an important thing that this book covers. But I was also just fascinated with how different it was than I thought it was going to be, especially as someone who's interacted with the story for so long. Like half my life I've been interacting with this story, and yet there were things that surprised me. For example, how early on we get Darcy's point of view, and how he feels about Elizabeth. I didn't see that coming. I thought it was going to be more of a mystery. I hated Mrs. Bennet. She was a terrible character. She really frustrated me. Wickham was also terrible. I knew he was going to be, but it was worse than I thought. Lydia also, ooh, and Mr. Collins, and Bingley was very dumb. I was disappointed. I was like, Jane, you deserve better. And there were also beautiful lines, though, so things that took me by surprise, in a good, bad way. And then, of course, you had the lines, Mr. Darcy saying, when he's talking about when he knew that he loved her. And he says something like, I was in the middle before I realized I'd begun. And you're just like, isn't that the way it is, though? So I really liked it. I wouldn't give it 5 stars because it still didn't quite hit for me. I think something about her books, they make excellent adaptations. But I don't know, there's just something missing for me in the telling of the story. I think it is because she does tell quite a bit, even as she learns how to show. Because Sense and Sensibility is way too much telling. Like, way too much telling. This felt like more of a balance. But yeah, that's my thought. Those are some of my thoughts. And I don't want to hold that book up anymore because it's freaking heavy. Okay. So then the next book that I read was, let's kind of go in order here. Raven Unveiled by Grace Draven. So you guys know I love Grace. I haven't talked about her a lot on here recently. She writes probably my favorite romantic fantasy books or romantasy books. And what I really love about her is her ability to sort of change the ratio of the romance and the fantasy depending on her series, whatever best serves the story that she's telling. So she has, of course, the Wraith King series, which is certainly, I think, my favorite series of hers, although I do love Master of Crows, even though it's only really a book and a novella and then some short stories. Master of Crows was excellent. And those definitely lean more towards romance, but there are real fantasy elements, and she does such a great job of bringing about fantasy worlds in a way that feels accessible. And her books don't feel like any of the books that I've read, and I'm glad that more people are talking about her. So Raven Unveiled is part of a series called The Fallen Empire, and I read books 1 and 2 in December of 2021. A lot of the time I was reading those, I was standing in line at Walt Disney World. So I hope I picked up on enough of those. But then I had to wait a year, basically, for the next book in this series, and this is the last one. And these are characters that we've been introduced to in books 1 and 2. You have Garrick, who is a man with a very dark past, murderer, assassin. He has some good reasons for doing what he's done, which is trying to provide a life for his daughter. She is protected by Siora, who is a shade speaker, I think they call her. She can speak to the dead. Garrick doesn't know this when he knows her before this book. But Siora protects his daughter Estrid when she is being attacked by a crowd with rocks because she is different. She was born with no arms. And Garrick in the book 2 is sort of led astray. I would say morally, because I mean he already is morally led astray, by the Empress, thinking that perhaps if he helps her find this dragon and, delivers the blood of the dragon to her, that he will also get some for Estrid, and it potentially could regrow limbs. And he loves his daughter and doesn't necessarily think that she's flawed, but he is so motivated to try to help her, and that is sort of like his downfall. So anyway, after a betrayal in book 2, Garrick is, number 1, like on the run, but 2, because the Empress is dead. And 2, he's hunting down Siora because he wants her to apologize to Estrid, because Estrid took her leaving very personally. And it wasn't Estrid's fault. Siora left because she couldn't stay. And so it's a fascinating series because the scales of fantasy and romance shift in this book in a different sort of way than her previous series, more similar to books 1 and 2. I think there's still a little less romance than books 1 and 2, but you do get to see characters from book 2, not book 1 unfortunately, but from book 2, and I loved it because you get to meet, I think it's Malachus and Helani again, and it was so sweet. I really enjoyed seeing them. So if you like fantasy books, dragons and magic, but also you like that sort of connection between characters, I highly suggest Grace Draven. She's awesome, and I really liked this book. I didn't give it 5 stars because I'm stingy these days. Okay, then I read, because I was in a Grace Draven mood, this book called Sunday's Child, and this is sort of a Norse / Scandinavian / like fae fantasy, like Santa thing. Santa's not the main character. St. Nicholas is the sort of mentor of this exiled elf named Andor. And Andor is exiled from his home for 1,000 years. He's basically immortal, so it doesn't really matter how long he's exiled for, because he slept with one of the king's concubines. And it was sort of an accident. I mean, it doesn't really matter. That's not part of the plot, really. The part of the plot is that he is going to be exiled, and at Christmas will serve St. Nicholas as a sort of a bodyguard, help him deliver gifts, that sort of a thing. And so he is delivering gifts with him. He's wearing like a, what's it called? Oh my gosh, I couldn't think of this the last time I recorded this video. This thing, filter. A magical filter. Someone's going to be saying it right now out loud, and you're right. I just can't remember what that thing is called. So he has that on, right? And he is at a house with St. Nicholas, who's sort of a father figure to him, a mentor to him. And there's a little girl named Claire, 7 years old, and she sees through it. And she can see who he really is. So instead of this tiny little elf, right, she sees this large man, elf ears, right, pointy ears, a lot of armor, very intimidating. And it means she has the sight. So she has this special gift. She's a Sunday's child, basically. That's where the title comes from. But eventually she'll grow out of it. And so years and years later, he's still on Earth. He once a year, helps St. Nicholas, but he's really enjoyed his time on Earth and has experimented in different careers and, is very eclectic. And he ends up running into Claire again, actually by accident, like for real, because she works at a museum as an archivist, and he is there as doing something. I don't know. It's something similar, but not the same job. And they reconnect, and it's this very sweet novella about whether or not he wants to reevaluate his future. He has 12 years left of this exile, and does he want something else with his life? And everything's resolved beautifully, but it's really sweet. Claire has this 10-year-old son named Jake. He is on the autism spectrum. He is nonverbal. His dad's not super involved in his life. And he and Andor connect. And it's just a sweet story. I really liked it. And it ended a little too soon but it was almost a perfect novella, which is so hard to find these days. So I'd recommend. I am working my way through the rest of Grace Draven's novellas and short stories. I'm almost through all of them. I just have a few more to go, and then I will have read everything. And then I'll be waiting on stuff, and it'll be so sad, and I'll cry. Okay. Then I've listened to some of these. I did listen to Pride and Prejudice. I listened to Book Lovers. And Holiday Trap. I listened to several, actually. Wow. I'm telling you, audiobooks changed my life. So I listened to Bridesmaids by Sydney Smythe. It's narrated by Teddy Hamilton. And the reason I chose this book is, well, there's a few reasons. Number 1, it's short. Number 2, it's gay. 3, I had heard on a list of narrator recommendations that I should check out Teddy Hamilton. So I decided this was the time. And it was also on Audible for free. Well, not free, but, I pay for Audible, so might as well use it. So this was a really sweet novella, and I gave it 5 stars. I don't know if it deserves it, man. Okay? I don't know if it deserves it, but I really enjoyed it. So it's about this guy named Cooper who, when he's 17 years old, has a life-changing makeout sesh with his crush and the star quarterback on the football team, Will Baker. And they make out in the locker room after Will is injured in a game. And Will kind of has a panicked sort of reaction. He's the one who initiates, but he doesn't quite reciprocate after they make out for a while. And it's clear that he hasn't really fully worked through his stuff. So it's 10 years later, and Cooper's coming back home to Michigan. Is it Michigan? Yeah. From New York. He's a writer. And his best friend Lisa's getting married. And he's going to be the bride's mate. And then on his way home from the airport, he's broken up with his boyfriend at the beginning of the story. Because his boyfriend's like, you know what, you don't love me, and I don't hold a grudge against you for that. It's just that, like, we're not meant to be. And Cooper thinks he's just kind of broken, that he's not quite sure if he'll ever love anyone. And he doesn't really know why. And we know why, but he doesn't know why. And so he's pulled over by the deputy sheriff when he's in Michigan. And who is the deputy sheriff but Will Baker? And Will openly talks to him, actually drives the manual rental car since Cooper's terrible at it, and ends up talking to him about, he's had an ex-boyfriend who was his former boyfriend is actually his current partner with the police. And so they have this potential reconnection because of Lisa's wedding, because Cooper's back in town for a little while, a few days, and Will is the best man. And so they have this opportunity to see each other and to look at each other in a new light. And Cooper is so frustrated that Will has been out and proud, but couldn't acknowledge that they maybe had a thing. Whereas and Cooper is starting to realize that maybe he's had a person all along, and that's why he could never really commit to anyone or feel that connection. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought that there could have been a couple more flashbacks when they were younger. I wasn't a huge fan of the way that young Will dealt with the situation, but I understand it, especially if you think about how long ago that was. But I really did like this book a lot, and it was very cute, and I thought, well done, and I just really enjoyed it. So I'm actually currently listening to When Harry Met Harry, which is another book on Audible by Sydney Smythe/Smith, and I'm about halfway through, and I am really enjoying that as well. And I just decided to listen to all her books. There's 3 of them on Audible. So one's more novella, and then one is more of a typical book length, and then the other I think is somewhere in the middle, around 5 or 6 hours. So I'm listening to all of them, and I'm having a great time. It's really good. I think When Harry Met Harry is like When Harry Met Sally. This sort of like play on 2 people who are friends, but it's not the right time until it is the right time. And I am still in the part of the book where it's not the right time, but I think we're getting there. So I'm excited about it. And then the very last book I read in the first half of the month is Just a Matter of Time. This is the cover. It's terrible. He doesn't have any tattoos, so I'm super confused. But whatever. I don't ask questions. I saw this on Instagram and was pulled in because sometimes I just really want a plus size read. We've talked about this, and I end up reading stuff that depresses me because, like, Olivia Dade always does representation super well for me, but in terms of like plus size representation. But what I cannot relate to as a regular adult human is like dating like a famous person, right? Which is what those books are about. So this one I thought would be a little bit more relatable. And it's about a girl who's a baker, and her name is Riley. And she has had a crush on her brother's best friend, Liam, for a very long time. She is almost 28. She's a virgin. She is totally cool with it. She thinks, you know what, maybe romance isn't for me. I've had a couple bad experiences. I'm not that interested in it. Liam has low-key been in love with her for years, and he's sort of like always there, very protective, not like scary protective, but like in terms of scaring other people away kind of a thing. That would be manipulative and weird, but he is protective of her, wants to take care of her, and it's really kind of sweet. Like, I was talking about it with a friend at work today, and the more I talked about it, the more I was like, wait, did I love this book? Because it also, she has like this really annoying personal like inner monologue, this commentary. And I wonder if it annoyed me so much because we all do that. I know I have ridiculous internal monologues, and she had so many, and I was like, girl, stop talking to yourself. And then I was like, wait a second. Valid. And so Liam has decided that he doesn't want to ruin his friendship with Patrick, which is basically his brother, and then Riley, and so he's never going to say anything. But then Riley adopts this cat who is outside of her bakery one day, and the cat is sweet, so cute, so adorable, but also might accidentally pull open the tie on her robe when Liam's in the house. Yes. And so you've got this whole like, do we want to not be together, but she's more of well, I can't have this, and why would he want this? But maybe I can use this to my advantage and learn something that might come in handy later with someone else. And he's like, okay, she thinks this is a teacher-student sort of a thing, that I'm going to educate her about sex, but I'm going to try to keep this lasting long enough for her to realize that, like, this is for real and I want this forever because she's my perfect woman. And it's actually just very sweet and very cute, and I liked it a lot, even if it was kind of ridiculous. And then, of course, I realized while I was reading this book, another personal hang-up of mine that pops up occasionally, and I take it so personally when this happens, which is the whole plus-size woman gets carried by a regular-sized dude. I can't handle it. It pisses me off because that's not realistic. And in this book, she's like, you can't do that. Like, you shouldn't be able to do that. Like, that's not real. And he's like, are you questioning my strength? And I'm like, yeah. And so but he does it anyway, so it kind of defeats the purpose. But I at least appreciated that she drew attention to it. But that's something that's always bothered me. And I've talked about it in videos before, not to like overly share, but like it bothers me because like it pulls me out of the story. I'm reading this book because of the realism, right? Like, I want to hear about the stuff that some people don't want to hear about. Like, she goes into like a detail on what her body looks like and feels like and the sort of like shape. And that is nice. I appreciate that. I relate to that. And then like he like carries her up the fucking stairs. Are you kidding me? No. And even like a couple times, I think twice, like hoists her up onto a countertop. And I'm like, dude, I can't even hoist myself onto a countertop. I gotta like really jump, like really, get on the countertop here. There's no way. Unless you're like Thor. Unless you're like 6'5", huge dude. I just don't believe it. I mean, show me the man that actually works with. And maybe I'll take back all my complaining. But I just don't believe it. So yeah. Anyway, those are my 12 books, guys. Technically, I get 10 books because one of them is like a 3-volume webtoon, but we're counting it. We're counting it because I can, and I will. But I feel really good about what I read. Like I said, most of these were on my TBR. Pride and Prejudice was on my TBR. Holiday Trap was on my TBR. Book Lovers was on my TBR. The books by Jamie Slosher technically were on my TBR. The Just a Matter of Time came out of nowhere. The Raven Unveiled was on my TBR. Sunday Child wasn't technically, but it was sort of an informal TBR because I knew I wanted to get to all of her books. And I just feel really good about what I've read so far. And I'm really excited to keep reading. Like I said, I'm listening to another Sydney Smythe/Smith book, When Harry Met Harry, on Audible. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. After I finish that, I'm going on to the next one, which I can't remember what it's called, Sleepless with You or something. So I'm excited about that. I'm currently reading a book by Riley Hart that one of my best friends recommended. And I haven't read any Riley Hart, but she texted me and she was like, this is the one I think that you should read. Because she's told me about so many. And she's like, I think this is it. And it's a character who is on the autism spectrum. It's called Boyfriend Goals. And I'm really loving it. And it is what I'm going to read when I finish recording this video. And hopefully uploading it. Because I'm just, God, if this video didn't actually work, I wouldn't have made it again. I just would have made a 3-hour full January wrap up instead of a mid-month wrap up. But thanks for sticking around. I appreciate your patience. I know I said that before. I know the video quality of this is a little bit more sketched than normal. Maybe it doesn't look that way to you, but when I'm recording it, it looks sort of like washed out. I don't know why, but it's okay. I'll get a new Chromebook and it'll be fine. I also have a new webcam coming as well. I let myself buy a webcam, like a real one that's not, built into my computer. But yeah, I'm excited. I hope that your first half of the month was productive. And I'm trying to get back on schedule. Like I said, it'll be helpful when I have a working Chromebook and a working camera. But soon I will be talking about my January 2023 plans. Plans for the new year just in general with reading and with this booktube channel and with my Instagram and things like that. And then you can also look, I think soon I'm gonna reread Beach Read and talk a little bit about Emily Henry. So I've got a lot of stuff going on. But thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening to me. It's been an hour. I tried. Okay. Bye.